on a Tuesday. We know you guys are super busy and we appreciate you taking the time to check out some new tools. Okay, are you all seeing the slides? Yes? Okay, perfect. Go on slideshow mode. Okay, welcome to our podcasting and digital media for TK-2 second grade. My name is Jessica Sierra. I am part of the Ed Tech team here at SDCOE. My co-host today is my incredible director, Alicia Gallegos Butters, who will be managing the chat and also recording. So we will push this out with the slides later in case you have colleagues that weren't able to make it today. This is the rest of my incredible team. We have Pamela Rabin, Chris Garcia, Carrie Lane, and then myself. Um, I also have the bit.ly up in the top right corner if you guys want to follow along, and it should be in the chat as well. A little bit of a plug for some upcoming events that we have. Here's a link to our full annual calendar as we are heading into March, which is insane. We have one more PD this month on I think this is Thursday. We have a PD about AI ethics, cyberbullying 2.0, and other classroom considerations for our new digital age. Then rolling into March, we have our next Curious About, which will be focused on an app slam. So it'll be kind of a variety mixed bag of different apps that you can try out. If you have an app that you'd like to share, I think this one is pretty open to whoever wants to show up and have a couple minutes to share a cool app. And we have some we'll be sharing as well. We also have an esports tournament coming up for Minecraft, which will be on a Saturday, March 15th, high school and middle school. And then to close out March, we have our another Curious about alternate reality games. So if you're interested in any of those, please register and you'll get the same reminders that you got for this session today. All right, a little bit of an icebreaker just to introduce the podcast topic. So this is podcast and digital media, but to be transparent, most of this is about podcasting, and then we'll throw in a little video and animation and stuff at the end. So if you wouldn't mind to just drop in the chat for a second, what are some podcasts that you tune into regularly? It could be professional podcasts, it could be things you listen to for fun, to relax. I threw a few of my favorites up here while you guys take a second to throw yours in the chat. Sort of my relaxing, mindless one is Smartless, which is basically just celebrity interviews. I love listening to all the different celebrities that come on there and have some time to just like be themselves and not the celebrity we see on screen. A couple professional ones I really like are the 10-Minute Teacher podcast because who has time for podcasts sometimes? The 10-Minute Teacher one is a real quick one I can listen to on the way to work, sometimes a few of them on the way to the work with traffic. And then Innovative Pedagogy is actually a podcast of our own Chris Garcia. So he pushes out some new innovative topics, interviewing different leading industry folks that are influencing education. And then another one I like is Radio Lab. It's kind of more of a story than just an interview. So those are some of my favorites. Let's see what you guys have to share. Hopefully you guys can take a few of these and add them to your own playlist. Good Mythical Morning. Yes, I love Good Mythical Morning. Stuff you should know, Freakonomics, some true crime, some sports podcasts. Excellent. Science Versus. Oh, that's you, Alicia. I was just gonna say that's one of Alicia's favorites. Awesome. Yeah, so it looks like we have some podcast fans in the room, which is great that you guys are familiar with the format. Thanks for that. So, just to give a little background in case you're not super familiar with podcasts, I have a couple examples of what a podcast could be. I think a lot of teachers maybe have one or two that they listen to, and that's kind of what they assume all podcasts are like. But there's actually a real big range of different types of podcasts. And this is how I also start my lesson with my students, just to give them an idea of a few different ways that podcasts could go. Obviously, there's lots of different forms of podcasts, but these are kind of the main ones that I've noticed that kids can really wrap their head around. I'm actually going to minimize that so we can listen to some of these. Um, and I'll give you guys a ton of resources about how to find podcasts that are student friendly. The first format is informative. So, just like informative text, these podcasts are really just to showcase information. So, they're just going through like different research, different facts. It's not an interview format. It's more of just listening and taking in different information. So a short snippet of that example is this Buzzing Bee BFFs podcast that's on this website. We play a little
In the
bit.
whole world. Pollination.
Polly, who now?
Are you
Pollination.
guys hearing the
You know,
audio?
when bees buzz,
Okay.
buzz, buzz their way around plants.
Okay, I need you to break this pollination stuff down for me. I'm a little bit confused.
Right, so a bee flies to one flower and gets covered in sticky pollen. Then the bee flies to another flower and picks up some new pollen and leaves a bit behind from the first flower. And this happens from flower to flower, doing the same thing over and over again. All this buzzing around fertilizes the flowers, which makes seeds, and seeds mean more plants.
That's cool, I guess, but what does it have to do with us? I mean,
Okay, so you guys get the idea. It's a little bit of an interview, but mostly they're just giving each other information about bees. The second format is more of a story. And this is a little different than audiobooks because it's not just reading a text that they could also have in front of them, but it's more of that like traditional oral storytelling. So this is another example of that.
Eggs from the chickens. Good morning, ladies. How did we do last night? Then she sold the eggs in the nearest village. Fresh eggs! Farm fresh eggs here. But one summer, the chickens stopped laying eggs. Myra tried everything. She changed their food, she put softer straw in their nests, but she and Mother were dismayed to find it was all in vain.
Okay, so you get the idea. It's a story, usually one narrator, but sometimes several voices. And then the last one is the interview format, which is probably what most people are used to. A lot of podcasts adults listen to are interviews. And this is one of my daughter's favorites. She's 5 and she's obsessed with Barbie. So Barbie, of course, has a podcast, which is actually pretty good. They have some interesting guests that come on. So this is Katya Echezarreta, I think is how you pronounce it, which is the first Mexican-born woman to go to space. So it's a little bit of the different Barbies going back and forth, and then they start to ask her questions and interview her.
So much for having me, Barbie and Barbie. And please, call me Kat. All my friends do.
Well, Kat, what are your thoughts on the question from Lost in Space?
I am really glad you both came to me for this. I've been in similar situations to Lost in Space before, and I don't want them or anyone else who has a big dream to go through these feelings alone.
Are you cool with sharing some similar experiences you've had?
Well, when I was a kid, I was told that my dream to go to space was only something a child would dream about doing, that it was something I'd have to give up on when I became an adult and do something more realistic.
Okay, so that one's a great one. I see a couple questions in the chat. Okay, just link to the slides. Perfect. So those are just a couple quick examples. If I was doing this with students, I'd probably have some listening stations where they could experience all 3 of these in the entirety, or at least a much longer snippet than what I gave you. And then we could break down, how are each of these different? What might be a format they want to pursue, or you might have a certain project where you really want to hone in on one type and kind of use these like you would a model text, but a model podcast, a model listening session. Okay, let's go back to full screen. Okay, so why podcast with littles other than it being a fun activity, a kind of more authentic assessment of their learning? It's also very standards aligned. So here are the listening and speaking standards for K through 2. And I just wanted to maybe get some of you to unmute, or you can drop in the chat. Where's like one or two ways that you can see in this? You don't have to read all of it, but what stands out to you of ways that podcasts could hit some of these standards?
Hi, I'm
And feel free.
Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
um, Giving 3 and 4 step oral directions, I feel like having them present part of a how-to as a podcast, like that informative piece, and having them do it orally as opposed to, or in addition to written, could work for that standard.
Yeah, definitely. I like the how-to connection. What else do you guys notice? Let's get like one more. Build on others' talk and conversation by linking their comments to the remarks of others. Thank you, Jessica. Um, yeah, definitely. So there's actually like a ton of ways that we could hit these standards using podcasts. The 3 and 4 step oral directions for sure, building on each other's. Also at the very basic kindergarten level, like just listening to each other and being able to take turns talking is a huge like milestone for a 4 or 5-year-old. Um, Obviously confirming understanding of a text so they could share their understanding through a podcast, through an oral presentation, rather than just written in text, or like someone said, a combination of both. I think Leslie said that. Ask and answer questions from what a speaker says, and on also being able to pull out those key details. So lots of ways that we could hit those marks. Um, and then in different styles of podcasts might lean into some of these standards more than others. So I tried to kind of put little icons. Like this was our interview one that helps with the listening to others and taking turns. The informative podcasts are a little bit better for doing those 3 or 4 step directions, confirming what they know about the text. And then really all three of those different genres can hit that third standard. Okay, and then we have our presentation of knowledge and ideas standards for also our listening and speaking standards, but the second sort of realm. And then what I love is it calls it out like right here, create audio recordings of stories or poems in grade 2. But even at the K level, just being able to speak audibly and express your thoughts. We have to teach the kids a lot to like slow down their talking. And it really is interesting to have them record and then hear themselves back because they're like, like most of us are like, hate to hear ourselves talking. And then they kind of learn how they need to slow it down a little bit or pause in certain areas to be able to express their thoughts the way they'd like. Um, so yeah, hits a lot of standards. It also, oh, there's my little icons again, hits some ISTE standards. So if you're unfamiliar with ISTE, they're not academic standards per se, like content standards, but more standards that guide educators in using technology. So making sure we're using our technology to a standard that's creating a high impact learning experience for students. And 1.6 for our ISTE standards is being a creative communicator. So that could mean video, that could mean just standing up in front of the class and using technology, but it could also mean podcasts. I like 1.6.B, which is original and remixed works. So you could teach them the concept of like listening to a podcast and then sort of remixing it for themselves, or duplicating it to like a different topic. So lots of standards being hit with podcasts. Some other benefits are just that increased engagement with their community, with their family, their parents, and also the ability to really play around with different senses, which I'll get into in a second. So for the community engagement piece, one podcast we did was with our Monarch School. And so we went into the kindergarten classroom we did some lessons on, the sensory experience, different types of podcasts. And the teacher, Miss Kat Lloyd, was really excited to do a podcast. Veterans Day was coming up. A volunteer in her classroom had a husband who was a Korean War vet, and he always comes in and like talks to the kids. So she said, why don't we do a podcast with that? And it was great. So she spent about a week prepping the kids. They listened to podcasts. How do you ask questions versus like statements? The whole who, what, where, when kind of thing. And then each kid had one question that they wanted to ask. And so we just this one was a whole group podcast. So we just kind of turned the mic on. All the kids got to ask a question, go around and ask a question. He answered. So it was a really engaging session. And then they got to see their audio recording at the same time. And then the school was able to share out this like huge community engagement piece with all the families in the community. And we got this super cute sound bite. Did it cut off? Let me try it again. Okay, my sound's being finicky, but you guys can listen to it on your own. And then I have the full recording here. Very minimal editing, so it was just kind of a play and go. We sort of cropped out the noise in the beginning and a little bit at the end. But as far as the middle, it was just sort of stream of the interview. Which was super fun. We've also done some parent-family engagement. So to try and test out some of our lessons, we had kids of our staff here, come in and try to test out some of these topics, these activities. And for our TKers, we found that they're really good for about a sentence or two, but we did have some really cute interviews with parents that you guys can listen to. I don't know if it'll play. Let's see if I can get one to play.
What is your favorite movie?
Oh, my favorite movie is Robin Hood. We've watched it a couple of times. Robin Hood's a very fun movie. Do you remember Robin Hood?
Oopsie.
With all the animals? What's your favorite movie?
It is Bluey.
Your favorite movie is Bluey? Why is that your favorite movie?
Because it has 1, 2 blue dogs named Bluey and Bandit.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so do
Whoop, sorry. Let me go back to try to get the other one. So they kind of lose interest after a while, but it was cute to get that engaging piece. And then you can share this with the families as like, like one of the macaroni necklace type things, if it was like Father's Day or Mother's Day or just a family night.
This
See if
red
I can get this
circle.
one.
Now you can talk into it.
Talk. What do you
Hi.
Right here.
Hi.
Okay. Now hit space.
With that big bar.
Hit that one. Okay, let's start. Ready? What is your name?
Nuna.
And what is your favorite animal?
Flamingo.
Flamingo. And if the voice sounds familiar, that's me and my daughter. So I was part of the test subjects as well. We also did this, we tried it with preschoolers. So this was 3-year-olds at our own little schoolhouse childcare center down in National City. We did a Mother's Day project where they had to draw a picture either of their mom or for their mom. And then we spent some time sort of listening, watching our voices, and had them try to record a little message to their mom. This was probably the most challenging of the bunch, but the 3-year-olds did it, and we got some really cute projects. We were able to link this with a QR code on their actual drawing. So they got to take home for Mother's Day a card for their mom with a little QR code that had this audio linked in there.
Happy Mother's Day!
So what's your name?
Sophia.
What do you want to say to your mama?
Love her.
You love her?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah.
What else?
I like snack.
Oh, you like snacks. Okay, great. So very honest. And then this is how we usually start our lesson as we come in. We kind of talk about different sounds. We play different sounds. We talk about how do we hear sounds. Most students understand we hear it with our ears. We get a little bit into the anatomy of an ear, but not super deep, just that there are bones and things in there that vibrate, and that's how we hear our sound. And then we bring in tuning forks that they can pass around and introduce the concept of being able to see sound. Because we noticed that was like mind blowing to them that they could see these sound waves. So when we started going into classrooms, we'll start with the tuning forks and let them see that you can vibrate, you can see the vibrations of sound. And then we pivot into some more digital tools. So now that they understand they could hear sound, we use a tool called Bouncy Balls. Has anyone used Bouncy Balls? Oh, it's phenomenal. It's just a cool little program. I don't know if it'll work now because I'm the only one in here, but it's basically you can use it as like I've seen a lot of teachers use it for noise, like keeping the noise down. I don't know if it'll read my sensitivity. Let me see. And yeah, it's not picking up my mic right now. But if you talk really loud, let me see if you can see it in this. You can see that the balls will bounce really high. You can set it to be very sensitive, so it'll like shh, it'll give a shush sound if they're getting too loud. So I had seen it used as teachers were trying to keep the noise levels down in class. They had to make sure the balls weren't bouncing too much. But we had a lot of fun with it, like get really loud, get really quiet. What do you notice about the waves? And it's just a fun little tool because it'll have like eyeballs for Halloween, or you could do bubbles, which float at the top, numbers, little plastic balls. So it's just a fun little way to introduce, to carry over that concept of tuning forks and vibration and being able to see sound. And then we used Chrome Music Lab, which if you've never seen before is also a super cool tool. It's sort of like this experimental tool that came out of Google, but there's all these different sort of, let me see which one I can play for you guys. Different games or tools you can make with that create sound. I don't have them. And so you can imagine on a touch screen, they have a lot of fun with this. There's also like different song makers they could make. There's a piano that they can share that will just play, you know, traditional piano sounds. So we sort of turn it over to them for a few minutes. Not sure what this one is, to play around with the different tools. And let's see. So they have a lot of fun with it, making their own sounds, being able to see it in different visualizations. And so I was going to give you guys a few minutes to play with that, but I think for the sake of time, I'm going to just keep going, and then you can always come back and play with this later. But highly recommend you check it out. If not for like, you know, a cool sensory experience, even if you're not pursuing podcasts, it's just a super fun little tool. Okay, so how to do podcasting with littles. One thing we learned was the equipment has to be very child friendly. So we noticed, try to move my little bubble over here. Our labs were built for middle school. And so the equipment that we were using in our labs weren't very TK-2 friendly. You could see this is my daughter with a giant headphones that wouldn't stay on her head. We use these ball microphones, snowball microphones, which are great. They're pretty industry, like professional for podcasting or just sound recording in general, because they have sort of a directional sound and like some noise canceling features for a crowded room. But you can imagine every 3 and 4-year-old just wanted to have that like on their mouth or like in their mouth. So trying to keep the microphones away from them, that was another challenge. Also, just having a PC was just way too much for them. I thought by using a mouse, we could like avoid the keyboard, but even that was a challenge for them. But when we started going into piloting in classrooms, even teachers who had never even attempted podcasting or thought about podcasting, most kinder classrooms have some kind of headphones. A lot of them have built-in mics, which were perfect. And then a lot of touchscreen devices, or at least trackpads that were a little more little friendly. So definitely recommend considering what equipment you have. It shouldn't take a lot of purchasing. Most sites have these around somewhere, but definitely considering what works for your little heads, little ears. Um, and then also their sort of fine motor skill ability. So touchscreens were huge. The snowball mics were okay for the group activities, but if I were to do it again, like the one-on-one interviewing, even these little toy mics, as long as you can plug it into a computer, they come bedazzled. They're kids are excited to hold them, and they do tend to keep them more away from their mouth than this like giant snowball thing. So the handheld mic could work better for partner work for sure. And as far as cost, they're not too costly. I think the snowball ones are like $40. But you can get these handheld mics for like $8, $10. And maybe have, one or two for the stations that you're using to record. Okay, getting into software, really this is more of the teacher realm. So I haven't yet done a class where the kids were editing. This was more of the behind the scenes teacher work. And honestly, if you do it right, you shouldn't have too much editing unless you really want a like longer form podcast with a lot of cuts. I think by second grade, they could handle this to some degree. We had a first grader or first graders that we worked with where we didn't ask them to edit anything, but they kind of were naturally wanting to like explore the Audacity system. And all of these are free, so you could totally play around with it, maybe save the original file and then let them have like a copy of the file to play around with. Audacity has professional capabilities. That's what a lot of podcasters use. And it's free, but you do have to download it. So it doesn't always work on Chromebooks. But if you have PCs or like a desktop station, that could work. But it is very high level. So it's user friendly if you're a grown up. It's easy to kind of figure out, but it's not very kid friendly. Audio Mass is one that we've used with kids. And I think that's what we use in our middle school lab as well, because that works on Chromebooks. It's web-based, very minimal editing. You actually can't edit very much within the audio recording, but you can chop off like the beginning and the end. So that works really well for kids that are kind of interested in editing, but don't want to chop it up too much. And the fact that it works on Chromebooks is a big one for teachers. You can also just use any device's recorder app. So iPads come with a voice recorder. Most tablets have some kind of voice recorder. Phones have the voice recorder. So if you're not looking to edit and you just want to record something, you can use a very simple recording program and just, have them hit start, hit stop, and then it saves the recording, and then you can figure out how you want to share that out. So lots of options for as far as software goes. Publishing, so we haven't really published publicly a lot of our stuff. If we have published it, it's just going out to families, maybe with the school. So most of the time we've just done a QR code or like sent a link to a shared folder where they could find their students or sent their individual students to them. If you are going to publish it, treat it like any other media and make sure you're getting parental permission. Even though it's not their face, they're, sometimes saying their name. They could drop some personal information in there. So you want to just make sure parents are aware that they are being recorded, even through just audio, before you're publishing on anything like Spotify. You could also host it on slides. So we've done kind of high school podcasts where each student gets a slide and they get to create some kind of artwork and then just drop in their audio file. So Google Slides is a great way to host it, especially if you're doing like an open house and you just want parents to kind of scroll through and find their students, or of course, like a school website. Okay, developmental considerations. So consider your conversational skill ability of your students. Every class, of course, is going to range. commonalities we've sort of noticed is that at the TK level, the like 4-year-old level, they're really good for about a sentence or two, and then they sort of lose interest. So we've tried like a Pied Piper sort of activity is what I've heard it be called, where students have studied, let's say, an animal, like the flamingo example. They know a couple of facts, and you sort of line them up, maybe like 4 at a time, and they just come up to the mic and say their name, say a couple facts about their animal, and then move on to a different station. And then you can chop it up while you're recording and start and stop for each student, or you can have a much longer one where all the students are kind of rotating through. But that sort of keeps the line moving. They're not sitting, they're not having to just sit and do like a longer form interview. So that seems to work well for the 4-year-olds. Kinder, the whole group interview worked really well. And then we also played around with the idea of having them tell a story. So storytelling is one of those standards. We tried like a popcorn method. So it's almost one of those like telephone type of games where you add something to the story every time it comes around to you. So we had each student have a mic, and one student started it off, or the teacher started it with a prompt, and then each student sort of added to it, and we came up with like a story at the end. So that's a really fun one, but they really seem to like the whole group activities. But of course, you could do like a shorter Pied Piper type activity too. By first grade, they're definitely ready for interviews. So this is a picture of one of our pilots. The student was in first grade and his sister was in kindergarten. And he just took that paper, and I just had a few questions I could like potentially ask, like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? And he got on the mic like, hello, my name is blah, 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 and I'm with my sister, da, da, da. What's your favorite food? Like he's ready for NPR. So the first graders really liked the microphone. I think they enjoyed like the banter back and forth. So that's a really fun one. And then also discussion. So I know in my daughter's school, they do a lot of warm-ups where it's like tacos or burritos. So you could have them kind of riff off that and have them have a longer conversation about what is it about pizza that you like better than grilled cheese or something. So you could have those types of little warm-ups, little mini podcasts, if you will. And then by second grade, for sure, they're ready to do some of those informative pieces where maybe they've studied something for a month, and instead of doing an oral presentation, they're doing a podcast. They could manage some editing skills, so you could teach them like some of those sound effects that they can drop in, maybe like some audio in, audio out, like simple edits. But by second grade, their conversational abilities a little bit higher, so they're able to do those longer form types of podcasts. Okay, so some resources to get you guys started. PBS Kids is always my number one go-to if you've never done this, if you're just kind of wanting to dip your toe in it. There's a ton of playlists. Let me actually pull it up. They all come with resources and activities. Most of the kids are familiar with some of these characters, which help because they're interested in hearing about Barbie's not on here, but like Molly of Denali, Pinkalicious is a huge one. So most of them recognize some of these characters, so they're more willing to sit and listen to some of these podcasts if you're trying to get them to really think about what a podcast is and how they might do one. And then they come with different principles that you could make. So it's really like easy lift to get started. They can listen to a podcast, answer some questions, and then you can have them do a similar one on their own. But yeah, PBS Kids just has a wealth of resources, so that's always like my go-to. And it's actually housed in the parents' side of PBS Kids, not the educator side, which is interesting. I think a lot of this stuff came about over the pandemic when people were at home and their kids were at home. It seems like a lot of that stuff is kind of dated in 2020, 2021. So maybe that's why it's with parents, but if you're looking in the educator side, you might not see it. So check those out. It's often standards aligned because PBS is usually pretty in tune with what Common Core standards are. So you don't have to worry too much if you're trying to hit certain standards. Another good one is Kids Listen. So this is less recognizable for kids, but it is there's more diverse voices. There are kids doing the narrating a lot of the time, or at least like very teacher sounding voices. So it's things that they can connect with. Um, so this is another great one, especially if you're looking for just different things that aren't like a character that's on TV, and some more real world stuff that they can relate to. And both of them are free, so you can peruse them. They're also very like family friendly, so I would feel safe like setting a kid up with that and letting them go through the different resources or the different podcasts, like a playlist for them to choose. It's all very kid safe and very like early ed safe. Okay, even more resources. This is some more of the like teachery back end stuff. So I have my lab slides that I use to like introduce the first part of podcasting, and then from there, depending what the actual podcast is, I've kind of gone in different directions. But that's a good place to start. I've got a sample lesson plan you can definitely check out, and a couple other really good articles that you can pull from. The 50 Ideas is a good one. The Epic List of Podcasts. This one I like, just from my own teaching, because sometimes I teach elementary and sometimes I teach secondary, so they give you options for both. So if anyone's in a similar situation where you deal with, a range of different ages and you want to do podcasting, um, they can this one will let you know, like if you're doing elementary, maybe start on this side. If you're doing secondary, this is how you could hit it. So animals, animal podcasts, elementary versus secondary, um, different um, nature ones, lots of different like history ones. So this is a cool one to check out too. And then this is just it's a short article about second grade and like how it was so beneficial for her students. So lots of articles to read if you're into that. Okay, a little bit touching on other digital media. Before I just completely move on from podcasting, were there any questions so far about that? Okay. All right, so a little bit on augmented reality, animations, and video. Um, One of my favorite tools, and a lot of times, like I like to warn teachers, this one's kind of technology for technology's sake, but there are some things that relate to standards, but it's just a super cool tool that kind of like blows kids' minds. If you've never seen Quiver Vision, highly recommend checking it out. It is one of those sort of like freemium apps, so there are free um, versions of it. And if you want to really get into it, there's a paid version of it too. I'll play the video because it's really hard to describe, but you can see it for yourself. So if you're unfamiliar with augmented reality, it's kind of like a VR experience, but it's these layers of virtual reality that are over your normal world. So you can still see the living room, but the drawing that the kid has colored is now coming to life when they view it on a phone or a tablet. So it's one of those things that's just really fun, but they do have a national park series that is free. So that's part of their free pack. This one's the butterfly one, which is my favorite, because it'll allow students to sort of, after they've colored the coloring page, they can view it and in the iPhone or iPad or tablet, and they can click around the different stages of a butterfly's life, and it will like animate each little stage. And some of them talk. I think the dinosaur one will talk and like explain some things about dinosaurs. So it's just a cool way to like reinforce some topics you might be covering already in class in like this really techie way. If you're feeling really brave and you're really like tech savvy, you can try to do these augmented reality posters, which my colleague Pam has figured out how to do using this Halo AR app. I linked the directions there. They are pretty technical, but once you sort of do one or two, you get a flow of it that makes it not as hard. But I'll explain what I mean. It's kind of like like a Harry Potter wall, if you can imagine that. So where the pictures sort of turn and talk to you. This is a Valentine's Day card that I did to kind of test out the technology. And so we're in a room, we scan the printed image,
Valentine's Day, we love you.
and it'll trigger a video to play as you're viewing it in the app. So we've done it with different industry experts in our lab. We have a poster of them, and if you scan it, they'll turn and start talking to you, just like in Harry Potter. It's definitely a teacher heavy background activity, but it could be super cool to have kids get involved in like the filming of it, designing it, and then it's one of those cool pieces to like post in your classroom or send home. So if you're interested in that, we're happy to follow up with you for the technology directions on the back end. Okay, so animations and video. With video, some tools that I've seen kinder through second grade use are things like Adobe Express. Most sites have some kind of like Adobe access. And so Express a lot of times is free. You might have to tell someone, at your admin office to turn it on for you. But it's a very student-friendly video editing software. I'll say at the like K and first level, most teachers I've seen, the students aren't really editing so much. They're doing the filming. So they might film a video based off a script they wrote, and then the teacher might kind of tweak it in Adobe Express before they push it out. But students can also design like logos in Express. They can do short animations in Express. There's a lot of capabilities with it for those more tech savvy students or as they get older. Canva is another good one. It's free for educators. Great video editing platform. Same thing though, a lot of the students are just filming the video, and then it might be a little more work on your end to do the editing, especially if they're like the TK-2 level. Another one that I just found that's actually been around for years, but I just came across it is Chatterpix, which sort of just it animates like a mouth on whatever they're choosing. So I'll play it just to show you. So they can either take a picture, or most times I've seen teachers curate a gallery that they can choose from. They record and draw a line where a mouth would be. And then it turns it into like a talking Post-it or a talking animal or basketball or whatever. So the way I saw it used is each student, it was kind of one of those animal reports where they had to have like a few sentences about an animal that they had researched. And then the teacher had a gallery set up on the iPads that they could find their animal. I think there were a few options for each. And so they chose an animal, put it on a background, and then made the line. And then they recorded their few sentences as a report. And so their report ended up being a picture of a moose talking all about mooses. So that's a fun one. Another little way to incorporate technology and video in there without having to video themselves. And it gives them an idea of what animation is like. Skills that they learn through this is things like scripting. Even if they're not writing, they can do some storyboarding. So draw out what they want their video to be. That concept of like planning and preparing before they do something. Revising and editing as they go. The speaking and listening skills. But what was really huge about this is watching the kids collaborate. So we watched kindergartners create videos of themselves explaining their class jobs, and then the teacher used that. They did that at the beginning of the year, and then every time the job would have to be renewed, they could go into this gallery and watch students talk about what their classroom job was and decide which job they wanted to try to go for the next month or however often the teacher changed the jobs. But the students had to collaborate because they had to help each other film, they had to help each other do their scripting. So it was really cool to see that teamwork at a very young age. Sample projects we've seen like class announcements, school announcements, things for holidays and events that are coming up in the school, end of unit reports, of course, and then phonics and word study. So one cool Adobe Express project was just the teacher had created like letters and the students had to practice and record like what each letter sounded like or like letter combinations. So they got to practice those phonics or sight words by creating these short videos. So it was like a cool different way of doing phonics that I hadn't seen before. Okay, and that is actually it for me. Here's our EdTech calendar again and my email if you want to reach out. You should have access to the slides and all of the resources, but we'll definitely send that out in an email as well. And happy to stay on for a little bit and answer any questions if anyone has any or wants to share out things that they've been doing. So thank you for being here. Oh, okay. I see some questions in here from Quiver Vision. Oh, and I love someone's using Chatterpix. So Quiver Vision, yes, you have to print them out from Quiver Vision. You can print any coloring page they have, but for the app to work with it, certain ones need the paid version, certain ones are free. All of the national park ones are free, like the butterfly ones. It seems like some of just like the ones like unicorns and things like that are ones that you'd have to pay for. And the bummer thing about Quiver Vision is it is a device specific subscription. So you really could only, I mean, you might just want to have one iPad designated for Quiver Vision. You couldn't, well, maybe you could do like 20 iPads, but it would be like $6 per iPad. When I bought it for my iPhone, I thought I could use it with my different devices, and I found out it was very device specific. So consider that when you're subscribing to it, but I think it's like $5 a month, so not terrible. Oh, awesome. I'm glad that Mesa Spring Valley has some littles getting into podcasting. Great. I'll definitely check that out. WeVideo is another great one. Yeah, and if anyone has podcast or video projects that they want to share, I'd love to come see some or support you if you want to take this on. Just reach out and we'd love to collaborate here. All right, I guess if there's no more further questions, we'll just end the recording. Thanks again for being here. We'll see you at the next one.